Well, it wouldn't do any good to tell me anything because I was too stubborn to listen.
Country music fans were rocked by a bombshell interview that revealed a whole new side of Willie Nelson. Long known for his easygoing ways and love for peace, pot, and poetry, the country icon finally dropped his guard. He didn't hold back, as he named fellow musicians he secretly disliked for years. One he dismissed as nothing more than a cowboy boot-wearing fake, and another he slammed as having style but no soul. The music world is buzzing, not just because of the biting words, but because the list includes both familiar foes and surprising choices. Curious to see which names made Willie's secret blacklist? Let's dig in. Hank Williams Jr. When tradition clashed with rebellion, sparks flew. And in the world of country music, few showdowns were as symbolic as the quiet tension between Hank Williams Jr. and Willie Nelson. Hank Jr., the torchbearer of Southern grit and country tradition, couldn't stomach Willie's free-spirited ways, especially the braids, the bandanas, and his unapologetic love for marijuana. On stage and off, Hank Jr. took subtle jabs at Willie's laid-back image, calling it a symptom of everything wrong with the shifting tides of country music. But while Hank fired shots, Willie stayed cool. He didn't bark back. He leaned on peace, not pride. In interviews, he shrugged off the criticism with his trademark calm, preaching freedom of expression and mutual respect. "We all walk our own path," he once said, "and I respect anyone who stays true to theirs." In the end, Willie's response wasn't just classy, it was a quiet revolution in itself. Hank Williams Jr.'s firebrand traditionalism stood in stark opposition to Willie Nelson's easygoing, rebellious spirit. Their public jabs may have stopped short of outright feuds, but the tension between them captured something far bigger, a cultural fault line running through the heart of the genre. In the 1970s and 80s, as outlaw country rose and old-school values dug in, the very definition of country music hung in the balance. Glen Campbell. At the height of country music's wildest transformation, one showdown simmered beneath the surface. Not on stage, but in the style and soul of the genre itself. On one side stood Glen Campbell, the polished golden boy with a voice as smooth as satin and a TV smile that charmed millions. On the other, the scruffy, slow-drawling outlaw, Willie Nelson, whose rise in the 1970s wasn't just musical, but cultural. As outlaw country exploded across America, Glen Campbell quietly watched his spotlight dim. Once the toast of Nashville, with mega hits like Wichita Lineman and Rhinestone Cowboy, and the host of the wildly popular Glen Campbell Good Time Hour, Campbell embodied a clean, crossover appeal that made him a household name. But suddenly, polished was out and gritty was in. Willie, with his unkempt hair, bandana, and middle finger to Nashville norms, became the new face of country cool. With albums like Red-Headed Stranger and the groundbreaking Wanted, The Outlaws, he didn't just win fans, he changed the very definition of the genre. Though Campbell and Nelson never traded blows, the unspoken rivalry lingered, not of fists or insults, but of eras clashing. One man stood for tradition and showbiz sheen, the other for rebellion and rustic authenticity. Their silent tension echoed the bigger question of the time: who really owned the heart of country music? As Willie Nelson's scruffy charm and rebellious spirit turned him into a symbol of musical freedom, Glen Campbell watched from the sidelines, polished, precise, and quietly frustrated. While Nelson lit up stages with his raw authenticity, Campbell, the studio perfectionist with crossover appeal, began to sense the ground shifting beneath his boots. The more the outlaw movement soared, the more Campbell felt that his brand of clean-cut artistry was being left behind. He never launched direct attacks, but his occasional jabs about image-trumping talent carried weight, thinly veiled digs aimed squarely at Nelson's ragged aesthetic and anti-establishment flair. For Campbell, it wasn't just personal, it felt like a cultural betrayal. He had built his career on discipline, virtuosity, and polish. Now, the spotlight had moved to the unshaven, the spontaneous, the rule breakers. There was no open feud. On the surface, mutual respect prevailed, but behind the smiles and sound bites, their opposing styles revealed a deeper struggle, one between country music's old-school elegance and its wilder, more defiant reinvention. And just when you thought Nelson's freewheeling charm knew no boundaries, another uneasy note echoed from an unexpected direction. Julio Iglesias. In 1984, Willie Nelson teamed up with Spanish heartthrob Julio Iglesias for To All the Girls I've Loved Before, a global smash that blended twang with international flair. Fans saw it as a beautiful fusion of cultures, a testament to music's power to unite. But behind the velvet harmonies lay a brush of cold reality. Not long after the song's triumph at a star-studded event, Nelson felt blindsided. Iglesias, suave and composed, allegedly gave him the cold shoulder, brushing him off in front of press and peers. Nelson wouldn't go into detail, but years later, he hinted at the snub with quiet hurt, saying Iglesias barely acknowledged their chart-topping duet or even offered a greeting. For Willie, it wasn't just about ego. It was about respect. The outlaw may have made peace with chaos, but even he wasn't immune to the sting of silence. For Willie Nelson, a man who built his career on humility, mutual respect, and the spirit of collaboration, one moment changed everything. What seemed like a simple slight, perhaps careless, perhaps calculated, struck a deeper chord. He didn't erupt in anger or call out names on stage. Instead, with his trademark calm, Willie admitted the experience left a bad taste in his mouth. There were no headlines, no war of words. But behind the scenes, the damage was done. The two never recorded together again after their chart-topping duet. Julio Iglesias stayed silent, never clarifying or apologizing. Was it a misunderstanding or a moment of ego slipping through? No one knows for sure. What is clear is this. For a man who welcomed artists from every walk of life and genre with open arms, this quiet rift was a rare and bitter note in a life tuned to harmony. It didn't blow up, but it ended what could have been one of country music's most iconic duos. Neil Young. In a moment that sent quiet shockwaves through the music world, Neil Young, never one to sugarcoat his opinions, took a surprising swipe at fellow icon Willie Nelson. During a candid exchange, Young reportedly downplayed Willie's guitar playing, labeling it as simplistic and lacking technical flair. Coming from a fellow rebel of the industry, the comment felt less like a critique and more like a crack in what fans believed was a brotherhood forged in authenticity and artistic freedom. For Willie, the jab wasn't just a matter of pride, it touched something deeper. His battered Martin guitar trigger isn't just wood and strings, it's a piece of his soul. Over the decades, Willie had carved out a singular sound, one that blurred genre lines and followed no rules but his own. His phrasing danced between jazz, folk, blues, and country, often defying traditional technique, but resonating with unmistakable heart. Did he lash out? Not Willie. He met the remark not with fire, but with grace. With a calm smile and a shrug, he reminded the world, "I've always played from the heart, and if it sounds good to me, that's enough." Though the comment stung, it never turned into a headline-grabbing feud. Willie kept strumming his way through decades of music with the same quiet confidence. And as time passed, whatever tension lingered was smoothed over by mutual respect. Two legends, walking different paths, but still part of the same timeless song. Waylon Jennings. Willie Nelson and Waylon Jennings weren't just musical partners. They were fire and smoke, peace and storm, a duo defined as much by friction as by friendship. While their faces were often side by side on outlaw country posters, their relationship was far more layered than the harmonies they sang. It all started in the dusty bars of Phoenix in the early 60s, where two rebels found kinship in a shared distaste for the Nashville machine. Willie, already bruised by the industry's constraints, warned Waylon, "Don't go there." But Waylon did, and on his own terms, he thrived. From that moment on, their connection became a dance of contrasts. Nelson, the calm philosopher with a guitar, Jennings, the storm with a six-string swagger. Behind the scenes, things weren't always as smooth as their chart-topping duets. They butted heads over music, money, and sometimes just pure personality. Willie floated through decisions with instinct and zen-like calm, while Waylon often insisted on control and precision. The result? Loud arguments, silent treatments, and decades of unforgettable records. Nelson once joked that they were like an old married couple, bickering endlessly, yet bound by a loyalty deeper than any feud. And that loyalty paid off. In 1978, Waylon and Willie became more than an album. It became a statement. With tracks like Mamas Don't Let Your Babies Grow Up to Be Cowboys, they didn't just sing outlaw country, they embodied it. Even when tension flared, they pushed each other to be better, bolder, freer. Their bond endured until Waylon's death in 2002. Not because they avoided conflict, but because they never let it break what mattered most. Together, they didn't just change country music. They rewrote its rules, one hard-fought note at a time. Ray Price. It wasn't music or money that nearly destroyed one of country music's greatest friendships. It was a rooster. Willie Nelson and Ray Price, two giants of the genre, shared a bond that spanned decades, born from their early musical partnership and cemented by mutual admiration. Their connection began back in the late 1950s, when an unknown, struggling Willie joined Ray's touring band, the Cherokee Cowboys, as a humble bass player. With Price acting as both mentor and bandleader, Nelson found his footing, honing his stagecraft and songwriting, while building a deep personal friendship with his seasoned guide. Their creative alliance produced magic. Nelson penned songs like Nightlife, which Price transformed into timeless hits. But just when it seemed nothing could shake their brotherhood, a strange twist involving a troublesome bird put their loyalty to the test. Insiders close to the duo recall a bizarre flare-up after Nelson shot Price's cherished rooster. A move that wasn't spontaneous, but requested by Price's exasperated wife. The animal had become a menace, attacking hens, wrecking the yard, and turning daily life into a barnyard battleground. Seeing no other solution, Price's wife urged Willie to take action. And true to his straightforward nature, he did. But when Ray found out, he wasn't just angry, he was heartbroken. That rooster was more than just noisy poultry. It was a pet, even a point of pride. In a burst of rage, Price is said to have declared he'd never sing another Willie Nelson song again. A deep cut, considering how many of those songs launched Nelson's career. Nelson, unfazed, fired back that if Ray had cared so much, he should have stepped in before the rooster started its reign of terror. He defended the decision with his usual dry wit and calm logic, brushing aside the emotional fallout. Still, time would smooth over the cracks. Old jokes returned, the music kept flowing, and their friendship bounced back, stronger than ever. Years later, Nelson would offer the most heartfelt gesture of all, a tribute album titled For the Good Times, released in 2016, 3 years after Price's passing. More than just covers, those songs were a final conversation, a musical farewell to the man who gave Willie a chance, a stage, and a lasting bond, even if a rooster once came between them. Ed Sheeran. What happens when a country music outlaw crosses creative paths with a global pop phenomenon? Sparks fly. Just not the kind anyone expected. In a collision that no one saw coming, Willie Nelson and Ed Sheeran found themselves locked in a surprising musical feud that set social media ablaze and stirred up a storm across genres. Within weeks of each other, both artists dropped songs with eerily similar titles and themes. Melancholy reflections on aging, love lost, and the winding road of life. Nelson's team didn't hold back. They accused Sheeran of lifting from one of Willie's unreleased tracks, claiming the young pop star had borrowed not just tone, but essence, perhaps even accessing confidential demo recordings shared within the industry. The allegation? Ed didn't just take inspiration, he walked too closely in Willie's boots. Sheeran fired back swiftly. "I'd never steal from a legend," he said in a public statement, dismissing the similarities as pure coincidence and insisting his songwriting came from personal experience, not borrowed brilliance. He praised Nelson's legacy, but stood his ground. As rumors swirled, Nelson's camp hinted at legal action. Music analysts and fans dissected both tracks, comparing chord progressions, lyric structure, and even emotional tone. Debates raged online. Was this homage, theft, or just a case of two artists tuning into the same emotional wavelength? Then came the twist. Behind closed doors, Willie and Ed met, not with lawyers, but with open minds. What followed was a surprising reconciliation. In a rare joint statement, they announced the feud was squashed. No lawsuits, no hard feelings, just mutual respect. The controversy faded, but it left a powerful message. Sometimes harmony can grow from discord, even when it starts with a legal threat. Merle Haggard. In a genre built on heartache, rebellion, and raw emotion, fans have long been captivated by rivalries that flare up like prairie fires. But what happens when two of country music's biggest outlaws, Willie Nelson and Merle Haggard, don't feud? Rumors have swirled for decades, whispering about tension between the red-headed stranger and the Okie from Muskogee. Yet behind the scenes, their story wasn't one of ego or envy. It was one of deep respect, musical alchemy, and brotherhood. Their bond began in the gritty days of the outlaw country movement, when both men were rebelling against Nashville's polished, predictable mold. Willie, with his jazzy phrasing and laid-back charisma, met his match in Merle, whose songs echoed the grit of working-class life with poetic precision. Together, they weren't competitors, they were kindred spirits. Their voices first collided in the 60s, but it was 1983's Pancho and Lefty that immortalized their chemistry. The song soared to #1 and sounded less like a duet and more like two outlaws swapping stories by a campfire. Fans were hooked, and the magic didn't stop there. Over the years, they released 6 albums together, including Seashores of Old Mexico and their tender farewell, Django and Jimmy, in 2015. Each project felt personal, not commercial. A conversation between friends, not a strategy between stars. Were there ever backstage disagreements? Maybe. But the record shows a partnership fueled by admiration. Merle once called Willie's The Party's Over a masterpiece. Willie returned the praise time and again. Their final recording, done just before Haggard's death in 2016, captured two aging legends at peace, reminiscing, reflecting, and harmonizing like they always had. Willie Nelson and Merle Haggard didn't feud. They harmonized, and in doing so, they rewrote the rules of country music friendship.